So, hello everyone. I suggest that we wait, let's say, 2 more minutes to get a bit of a fuller room, and then we start with little introduction and then proceed with Meghna's talk. So, I think we are at a good amount of people, and it's 3 past 3. So, and that just as I speak, Yorgos has joined. So it seems like that's an effective method. Welcome everyone to another episode in the series of public seminars of the REAL project, also known as Post-Growth Deal. Today, we're gonna learn about research by Meghna Goyal, titled Increasing Inequality in Agri-Food Value Chains, Global Trends from 1995 to 2020. Just a few words about Meghna. Meghna Goyal is a doctoral candidate with the REAL project here at ICTA-UAB. Her work is in critical agrarian political economy with a focus on international trade in value chains and unequal exchange in the agri-food sector. Broadly, she's interested in value chain analysis and distributional consequences of globalization, of which we will hear today. Just 2 more details. This talk is recorded, so you may be able to repasar it later. And then here is the link that I post in the chat, where you'll find, in the future, find this talk, and already can find the previous talks in the public seminar series of REAL. With this, I give the mic to Meghna.
Hello everyone. I'm Meghna. Just to do a quick sound check, everybody can hear me fine? Great. Okay, so I'm gonna start my presentation. Oops. So okay, can you grant me request? Yeah, thank you. Wait a second. Okay. Cool. So you should be able to see my presentation now. Let me start from the beginning. Okay. So I'm presenting today part of my PhD research. This is my first paper, and it's already published in a journal called Global Food Security, along with my supervisors Jason Hickel and Praveen Shah. As you can see, that it's research on inequality in agri-food value chains, on which is the broad topic of my PhD. And the purpose of this paper specifically was to was to ask what kind of impact do trade and industrialization have on distributional consequences within agriculture and food. I'm taking for granted that everybody agrees and believes and knows that there is an increasingly rapid trade in agricultural commodities, that in the primary form, in the processed form, exports and re-exports many several times over. And the prominent arguments for both trade and industrialization in the mainstream disciplines, let's say, are one, efficiency, which is to say that if there is more trade and more industrialization in the production of agriculture and food commodities, we should be able to see more efficiency, so that the same amount of food could be produced using less water or less land, and therefore would be more efficient. Like, we would distribute crop production to areas where there is higher natural productivity. These will be exported to world regions where there is not such high productivity, and therefore everybody can be happier. The whole production system can be more efficient, um, at the terms of material biophysical production. And then there is an argument for development that's made by economists in the mainstream disciplines, which is the argument of structural transformation. It's argued that with trade and with industrialization, developing countries that are more disproportionately dependent on agriculture for employment um, will be able to upgrade to higher value-added production activities. They will be able to access better markets, better off markets from where they can sell their high-value commodities and be able to move along the development chain, let's say. And so the goal was to see if that is being played out and what really causes trade and industrialization. And so we already first of all, I mean, very quick update on what has happened in the last 20 or 30 years for global production of agriculture and trade in it. We see that at the global level, global South countries identified by IMF's low income and middle income countries, and global North as high advanced economies, that the total global agricultural production has already shifted overwhelmingly to the global south in only 26 years, between 1995 and 2020. We see that the global south countries went from producing about 50% of global agricultural production to about 80%. And of course, global north was able to reduce their share in production. This is also borne out in consumption details. Data from this is not my data, but this is data from the FAO, which showed that in fact high income countries get about 60% of their consumption needs met from imported food commodities, most of them agricultural commodities. So we see that that most food consumption and most food production is now very internationally linked and very internationally dependent. This, of course, has huge consequences for food security in general, especially in today's very uncertain world, vis-a-vis tariffs, etc. And so let's see so there's been an increase, like a burst of production increase in the world, especially in the global south. Both the global north and the global south have increased their production in monetary terms. And we see that for the global north, this increase has not been so significant as for the global south, but most of this increase is still being seen for direct consumption. So crop cultivation for direct consumption for human needs. There's a 40% increase in the amount of in the amount of agricultural commodities grown for food manufacturing and feed purposes, and some for industrial purposes. Whereas in the global south, the entire incentive or the entire direction for the increase of output in agriculture has been driven by processing requirements and industrial requirements, so that the increase in direct consumption from these crops has been low for the global south, even though global south countries are disproportionately undernourished, malnourished, and also food insecure. Most of the increase in agricultural production in these countries has been for processing purposes and also for processing for trade and global commodities purposes. We already see, for example, through this, that there's some evidence for industrialization in agri-food, which is not to say the industrialization on the farm, that is the use of more mechanical or more machinery, etc., in farming, or the boom of the concentrated animal feedlot. But what it refers to is the pull of various industries for agricultural raw material, which includes food manufacturing industry or ultra-processed food commodities. It includes cosmetics, which pull many agricultural commodities as industrial raw material, more starch, more biodiesel production, more biofuel production in general. And this increasing as industrialization is one aspect of what we can already say of global agri-food value chains. And then if we take, for example, the case of, if we come to value chains now, and we look at a specific one, for example, the one on chocolate, other research has shown us that for exporting countries, for example, there has been that farmers earn about, let's say this is what you see on the screen is what they get for selling cocoa. And then at the end, the total consumer price of the whole chocolate that is produced based on 664 worth of farmers' incomes investment is about 18,000, which is more than 10 times of what the farmers sell at. And the farmers sell at 1874. And so all of this in the middle is money made in stages of production, such as international transport and trading and processing and manufacturing. So we further see the same kind of industrialization within a value chain. And what we begin to notice here is, of course, that there is a huge inequality in distribution of the total economic value that is made in the chocolate production, for instance. So 44% of total money that is made from the sales of chocolate in the world goes to retailers and manufacturers, and only 6.6% is estimated to go to farmers. And so this really is the overwhelming corollary of the boom in trade that has occurred in the last 26 years, and also the boom in the shift of agricultural production to the global south. And so what we see from this example is that when there is trade between unequal partners, there is, quote unquote, a process called surplus extraction or value transfers, or there are many academic terms for which for our purpose we can use interchangeably right now, is that there is a process under which higher and higher inequality between the distribution of returns can already be noticed. And this kind of high inequality would lead to inefficiency because we'll come back to this later, but this is the argument that we see that I would like to make throughout the talk. So we'll keep coming back to it later. But what we see from the case study of chocolate, for example, can be seen by my paper at the macro scale. So I present evidence in the paper on the distribution of economic returns and agri-food value chains at the global macroeconomy level. And from there, we see that there is a huge divergence between the countries and areas where agricultural production occurs and countries where most value added is located. And value added is a term that economists famously use for referring to generation of revenue minus costs. So we could also say that more profits are being made instead of value, interchangeably for our purposes right now. So we already see, for example, that in these 26 years, the global north has started already from earning about 3.5 times as much from food production in general than they produce of agriculture, which is to say that there seems to be some kind of concentration of activities in the global north that is not agriculture, but still derives income from food production. The global south, on the other hand, although it has expanded vastly the amount of agricultural production it undertakes, isn't able to increase increase the non-farm incomes as a basis of the farming incomes proportionately as the global north. And we see that this kind of like divergence of earnings is happening in what are called within value chain discourse as forward linkages, which is to say all the post-harvest activities from taking an agricultural commodity from the farm, transporting it, warehousing it, retailing it, processing it, grinding it, manufacturing it, manufacturing another in an industrial commodity from it, etc. And so all of these are called forward linkages. Backward linkages, on the other hand, refer to activities such as providing fertilizers and manure and many agricultural inputs, mechanical inputs, herbicides, etc. And so we find that in the forward linkage sectors, there is a huge that's where the international division of labor appears or makes itself apparent within agri-food value chains, in which we see that there are a few countries that are able to earn many times more than what they produce of agriculture from the value chain itself. And these countries, shockingly or unshockingly, are countries that the red line, for instance, in the forward linkages just refer to tax havens, which include countries like Singapore, Luxembourg, Hong Kong, Ireland, etc. And these economies are able to, even more than the other global north economies, extract a vast amount of economic value compared to the production that it undertakes. So, and then even within a breakdown of all of this, if we remove the divergence between global north and global south, we see that the top 6 countries within the pool of the many tax havens that are able to that are able to earn a lot of economic value are not producing are earning as much as 4 or 5 times. And this in itself holds a lot of inequality. We know that Singapore, for example, in 2020, earned 69 times as much from the agri-food value chains as it produced of agriculture. Similarly, Hong Kong, about 30 times as much. And the rest of the world there's a falling share of non-farm to farm income. So we see that as industrialization occurs, there is a concentration within the distribution of returns that are made, and this concentration is at the same time accompanied by a reduction in the share of what farming gets within the global economy. And so we see that of these activities that comprise the value chain, the global north is dominant in professional technical support activities in the FIRE sectors, which refer to finance, investment, real estate, etc., whereas it undertakes the least of agriculture. And this holds true even when we separate China from the analysis and show it as a separate country from the rest of the global south. And so the the globalization is within agri-food value chains has led to a state in which there are 2 broad patterns, one being industrialization, the other being cost suppression within farming. And these two have not only allowed for the level of trade to come to what it is now, which is about 1,600 kilocalories per day per person are traded in the world every day. And such trade wouldn't be, my argument is that such trade wouldn't be possible without both of these processes being undertaken, and that since they engender or they structurally lead to more inequality, they are at the same time very inefficient at the terms in terms of material use. Yeah, and so I can also link my paper in the chat. And I was able to show that this kind of inequality has only skyrocketed in this time. So what I told you earlier, that Singapore earns 69 times as much as it makes of agriculture, it was in 2020, and it's already such a huge increase from 1995. And so we must beware of globalization not being a route to extract value. These things have very much to do with, in general, the agrarian question within the social sciences, etc., which we didn't deal with in this presentation, but should definitely be brought into the discussion. And I hope that we can talk about it now in the question and answer round. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Meghna. We will now proceed to questions, and I will collect them, please, both through chat and through direct speaking, and we will process them in batches of 2, not more than that. That's the request of Meghna. Caroline?
Yes, thanks. I didn't want to go first, but I didn't see anybody else, so I thought I would dare to jump in. And I wanted to thank Meghna for this presentation. Very interesting, and yeah, I really look forward to reading the full paper afterwards. My question is, I am a co-leader of a project that we're calling Agreement on Agriculture Reimagined. And just to summarize, the starting point for that project is that current agriculture trade rules are not working, whether it be from social justice, economic justice, environmental, whole range of perspectives. It's not working. And so we're saying, rather than trying to sort of reform the World Trade Organization rules on agriculture, what if we started afresh? What if it was people like, I assume people like us in a room saying, okay, some trade is good, but how do we regulate it so that it's positive for all people involved and providing food security and so on. So where it's funded by the Swiss National Research Foundation, and we're sort of coming towards the end of it now. So basically that's sort of the background, but I suppose my question is, what I'm interested, I don't know if something you've thought about, Meghna, or others here, is if, how would you translate your findings into regulation? What would you say, okay, so to address this problem, which I assume we agree it's a problem, what would you regulate and how would you do that? So I'm very interested in any thoughts anybody might have on that question. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Meghna, for your presentation. I also have a question. It will be the last of this batch, I suppose. So my question goes more towards maybe questioning or bringing about the limitations, what you were trying to hint at. So talking a bit more about the agrarian question in the social sciences and talking about the limitations whereas it brings some important observations about the current state of imperialism, it is also important, I guess, to look more critically at the division between global south and global north when it comes to the agrarian question, because I don't know, for example, the podcast that I sent you about the situation in Spain with agriculture and the reality of what's going on in this country that is considered global north, but together also with the rest of countries in the European Union, actually the agro industry, which is what produces most crops in Europe, are actually, yes, also dealing with a lot of problems that are equiparable or comparable to problems when it comes to the material conditions of the working class. So I was wondering, how if you have any thoughts on that.
Okay, so should I process these questions? Sergey said. Okay, cool. Thank you, Caroline, for your comments. Very, very excited to know about the project as well. I mean, it's a great question. How do we regulate this kind of thing? And I guess the answer depends on what exactly we are tackling with the regulation. There are some, I mean, and also the kind of horizon that we have, that we plan the regulation on. So if it's in the short term, for instance, then we want to make sure that the immediate distributive inequality is somehow redressed. That there would be when these agreements are being designed, for instance, if you're just in the world of agreements for now, what kind of things will be agreed to exchange? For example, one thing that extracts a lot of value or surplus from the agricultural value chain, of course, as in many other cases, including pharmaceuticals and manufacturing, is actually intellectual property. Maybe the immediate redressal system within these agreements would promise countries more help from more countries in the global south, more help from the agreeing countries in the global north for knowledge exchange and for agricultural extension service aid, etc. And so this, I would imagine, I mean, off the top of my head, in the short run. In the long run, surely there must be some kind of management of what kinds of activities agricultural raw materials are actually used for, because as I noticed is that the process of creating new markets by producing more industrial commodities that were before not produced at all, or not produced at the scale at which they are produced currently, would have to be planned at some kind of central level. And so, for instance, a massive production of biofuel and of several kinds is contested. The material efficiency of such production at the scale that it's being produced at is contested by many credible sources. And I would say that to manage that kind of thing, one would need like some kind of coordination at the international level that goes beyond just rules and agreements in trade. Otherwise, I'm incredibly curious as well to hear what you think about this, and also what others in the room think about this, as of course one should. I mean, this of course is the goal of doing such kind of research, so that we can guide this kind of regulation activity in the future. But for now, this is what I would say. And on Amaya's question, I'm not exactly sure that I understood. But what I would say is that, I mean, from what I understand, and I'm not very clear on the subject, is that for European farmers right now, the biggest immediate threat seems to be the Mercosur trade deal with Latin American countries, which would reduce the value, I mean, the value of agricultural commodities being sold in the EU market, and would undercut EU farmers by a lot. And from what I understand, the kind of imperatives that we see within global agricultural value chains is not only harmful for countries of the global south or for farmers in the global south, but of course for farmers in the global north as well. This kind of immense inequality, of course, comes at the same time as the concentration of market power and production, even in the global north. So keeping global south farmers incomes in at bay is a direct way of keeping such prices also low for European farms. And of course, this kind of pressure that it makes on the European farms to also continue producing at very low prices results in the kind of horrible use of labor that we can see also on Spanish farms under contract farming, under smuggling migrants into Europe for agricultural labor. But I'm not very knowledgeable on the issue yet. But maybe if you want, you could clarify your question a bit, or comment as you think fit.
Yeah, I just think that what my claim that I was wondering if you would support is that I think it's really important to think about the agrarian question beyond this distinction between the South and North, although it is important that it is made due to imperialism. But then I think it is important also to look at the ways in which certain forms of exploitations that have to do with the economic imperatives of the current economic model take place globally and not only in global South countries. And many times done towards migrants of the working class, of migrants from the global South that are working in the agro industry owned by investors in, for example, Spain. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, everything's clear. Thank you.
Right. I think the management of agricultural labor within the world is very much related to the management of the reserve army of labor, quote unquote. And of course, a global reserve army of labor is disproportionately in the global South, and that is a fact of imperialism. But of course, the existence of it has many consequences for the working class within the advanced countries. And it was never to say that it's the global North workers that benefit at the cost of the global South, of course.
Zara has a question.
So let's have the question of Santiago and Zehra. Yeah, I can maybe read out Santiago's question. So the question is, I was wondering if you could observe some trends in consumption inequality within the global South. I guess what I have in mind is if globalization at least managed to get cheaper food to places with low agricultural productivity, or if trade was oriented only south to north.